Case number 1, Rebecca Grossman.
The judge has sentenced socialite Rebecca Grossman to 15 years to life in the hit-and-run crash that killed 2 young brothers in Westlake Village back in 2020.
She was known as a socialite in Los Angeles, the kind of woman who appeared at charity fundraisers, co-founded a foundation for children's burn victims, and lived in luxury neighborhoods where wealth and influence were the norm. But on one September evening in 2020, Rebecca Grossman made choices that would destroy her reputation, her freedom, and 2 young lives. It was September 29th, 2020, in Westlake Village, one of those quiet, upscale suburbs where families feel safe. That evening, Nancy Iskander was crossing a marked crosswalk with her 3 sons. 11-year-old Mark held the hand of his 8-year-old brother Jacob. Just a few steps behind, their mother pushed their youngest in a stroller. Then, out of nowhere, came a white Mercedes-Benz SUV. Witnesses described it as flying down the road. Fast, unrelenting, and far above the 45 miles per hour speed limit. In reality, the SUV was traveling more than 80 miles per hour. It struck the boys with catastrophic force. Mark's body was thrown over 250 feet. Jacob's was hurled nearly 50. Their mother could only watch in horror as her 2 children were taken in an instant. Behind the wheel was Rebecca Grossman. She wasn't just speeding. Prosecutors later revealed she was tailing her then-lover, former MLB pitcher Scott Erickson, racing recklessly down the street, and investigators discovered she wasn't sober. Grossman had both alcohol and Valium in her system. Instead of stopping, Grossman kept going. Her vehicle only came to a halt when its emergency system forced it to stop. But by then, it was already too late. At first, she tried to explain it away. She told investigators she didn't see the children. She suggested another car might have hit them. She even tried to shift blame toward Erickson. But the evidence told a colder truth. The SUV's black box data revealed her speed. Surveillance cameras captured her route. Cell tower pings placed her at the scene. Her story collapsed under the weight of technology and testimony. Even worse, prosecutors accused her of showing little genuine remorse. Instead of fully accepting responsibility, she fought the charges with excuses, painting herself as a victim of circumstance. On February 23, 2024, a jury found Rebecca Grossman guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of vehicular manslaughter, and hit-and-run causing death. She was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison, plus 3 additional years for fleeing the scene. Inside the courtroom, Nancy Iskander, the boy's mother, gave a statement that silenced everyone. "You didn't just kill my children. You tried to erase them with lies." Today, Rebecca Grossman is no longer a philanthropist or socialite. She is inmate number WLF 932, serving her sentence behind bars. A woman who once flaunted wealth and status now faces the possibility of parole in about 9 years, a fact that continues to torment the families she devastated. From charity galas to prison walls, her story is a reminder that money and privilege can't erase recklessness, nor can they bring back 2 boys whose lives were cut short. Case number 2, Amy Preasmyer.
Does that come to you every once in a while? Do you have nightmares or dreams?
It does. Not in nightmares or dreams, but it's there. It's not something I can erase. It's something I don't like to think about. But there's also a part of it that I don't want to forget what I've done either. I can't make it go away, and I don't feel it would be right to make it go away.
In the late 1990s, Lancaster, California was the kind of community where neighbors waved to each other, and young couples dreamed about starting families. That was the life Ricky Cowles Jr. thought he was building. At just 21, Ricky was an electrician, hardworking, quiet, and dependable. He was also about to become a father. His 16-year-old girlfriend, Amy Preasmyer, was pregnant with their child. To Ricky, this was the start of a family. To Amy, it was the beginning of something she wanted to escape. On August 12, 1997, Ricky was found in his apartment, brutally beaten with a claw hammer and then shot in the head. The injuries were catastrophic. He was rushed to the hospital, but he never regained consciousness. 3 days later, he died. The person who dialed 911? Amy herself. She cried, trembled, and told police she had just discovered the horrific scene. Detectives were baffled. There was no forced entry, nothing stolen, no sign of enemies. Just a young man murdered in his own home, for reasons no one could explain. The case went cold for nearly 2 years. Then came a break. In 1999, a man named Billy Hoffman couldn't keep his mouth shut. He bragged about killing someone for money, and eventually, word reached the police. When investigators confronted him, Hoffman spilled everything. He said he had been hired by Amy Preasmyer to kill her boyfriend. And the plan was more elaborate than anyone had imagined. According to Hoffman, Amy recruited her friend Jennifer Kellogg and another accomplice to help with the weapon and logistics. Amy had made sure Ricky would be home that night. Unsuspecting, Hoffman attacked him with the hammer, then pulled the trigger at point-blank range. Hours later, Amy arrived at the scene, playing the role of the devastated girlfriend. For years, her act worked. She grieved in public, raised their child, and carried on with life as if she hadn't masterminded the entire crime. But the truth always finds cracks. Hoffman eventually testified that Amy promised him thousands of dollars for the murder. Investigators gathered secret jailhouse recordings and even caught Amy on tape saying, "If Hoffman doesn't testify, they don't have an expletive case against me." That one line revealed everything about her mindset: confident, calculating, and cold. In 2008, after more than a decade of deception, Amy Preasmyer was convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation to commit murder. The sentence? Life in prison without parole. The most heartbreaking part isn't just Ricky's death, it's what came after. The child Amy was carrying, Ricky's child, grew up without a father. Not because of an accident, not because of illness, but because his own mother orchestrated his father's murder before he was even born. Today, Amy serves her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility. Her parole hearing is scheduled for 2025, but given the cold nature of the crime, release seems almost unthinkable. For Ricky's family, her betrayal remains the deepest wound, a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger comes not from strangers, but from the person you trust most. Case number 3, Leslie Van Houten.
Leslie Van Houten will stay in prison after California Governor Gavin Newsom overruled parole. This is the second time Governor Newsom has blocked her release. Previously, former Governor Jerry Brown also rejected parole for her twice.
In 1969, Los Angeles was gripped by fear. Just one night after the infamous Tate murders that shocked Hollywood, another home would become a blood-soaked crime scene. At the center of it all was a 19-year-old girl who had once been a high school cheerleader, described as polite, soft-spoken, and full of potential. Her name was Leslie Van Houten, and she was about to become one of the most notorious women in California's history. On the night of August 10, 1969, Van Houten, under the direction of Charles Manson and alongside fellow cult members Tex Watson and Patricia Krenwinkel, entered the home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. The couple were ordinary people, kind, hardworking, and known for running a small supermarket in Los Angeles. They had no idea strangers were watching them, no idea their names had been plucked at random to fuel Manson's vision of chaos. Inside the house, Leno was tied up in the living room. Rosemary was dragged into the bedroom. What happened next was ritualistic, brutal, and senseless. Tex Watson stabbed Leno repeatedly. Rosemary fought for her life as Van Houten and Krenwinkel held her down. At one point, Tex handed Van Houten a knife and ordered her to finish the job. Leslie obeyed. She later admitted she stabbed Rosemary LaBianca at least 14 times. At trial, Van Houten would claim Rosemary was already dead when she delivered those blows. The autopsy proved otherwise. Rosemary had been alive, struggling until the end. The murders weren't just violent, they were symbols of Manson's delusion, what he called helter-skelter, a race war he believed he could ignite through terror. And Leslie Van Houten, intoxicated by drugs, groupthink, and blind loyalty, went along with it. When she and the other women were arrested, the world was stunned. In court, Van Houten and the Manson girls laughed, sang songs, and even carved X's into their foreheads to mimic their leader. America watched in horror, trying to reconcile the face of an ordinary teenager with the savagery of the crime she committed. In 1971, Van Houten was sentenced to death. But when California struck down the death penalty, her sentence was reduced to life in prison. For decades, she remained behind bars, a model inmate. She earned a college degree, tutored other prisoners, and participated in therapy. Over time, she expressed deep remorse, admitting she had been manipulated but refusing to shift full blame onto Manson. "I was weak," she told a parole board. "I was a coward. People died because of it." For more than 50 years, governors denied her release, insisting the crime was simply too horrific. But on July 11, 2023, Leslie Van Houten walked free after serving 53 years. At 73 years old, she was granted parole, becoming the first Manson family member ever released from prison. For some, it was proof of redemption. For others, a betrayal. As Sharon Tate's sister Deborah put it, "She may look like a grandmother now, but I still see the girl with the knife." And that's the chilling question Leslie Van Houten's story leaves behind. Can someone who committed something so monstrous ever truly be forgiven? Case number 4. Monica Sementilli. On January 23, 2017, the quiet neighborhood of Woodland Hills, California, was shattered by a brutal crime. Fabio Semantillo, a well-known celebrity hairstylist who had built his reputation working with Hollywood stars, was found stabbed to death on the patio of his own home. He had been attacked viciously, stabbed 7 times, his throat slashed, arteries severed. The man who had styled red carpets and inspired young professionals in his industry was left to die outside the house where he raised his family. At first, police thought it might have been a burglary gone wrong. The scene seemed staged, valuables left behind, an open space suggesting intruders. But experienced investigators quickly noticed the inconsistencies. There were no signs of forced entry. Even more suspicious, security footage from the home had been deliberately erased. Whoever had killed Fabio wasn't a random intruder. This was someone with access. The trail led back inside his own home, to his wife, Monica Sementilli. On the surface, Monica looked like the perfect suburban wife. A mother, a partner to a successful man, and a woman who had it all. But behind closed doors, she was carrying on an affair with Robert Baker, a former adult film actor with a history of violence and a reputation for trouble. Together, they hatched a cold plan: kill Fabio and cash in on his $1.6 million life insurance policy. According to prosecutors, Monica played a crucial role. She left the door unlocked that day, fully aware of what would happen next. Robert Baker arrived with an accomplice, Christopher Austin, and together they carried out the savage attack. Hours later, Monica dialed 911, playing the role of the devastated wife who had just found her husband's body. But the evidence was overwhelming. DNA at the crime scene, cell phone records placing Baker and Austin near the home, the deleted surveillance tapes, and perhaps most damning, text messages between Monica and her lover that exposed the entire conspiracy. When Austin decided to cooperate with police, the truth unraveled completely. He testified how Monica had orchestrated the plot, encouraging Baker to kill her husband and luring Fabio into the perfect trap. At trial, Monica showed almost no emotion, even when her own daughter Isabella looked her in the eyes and said, "You ruined our lives." In 2023, Baker and Austin were both sentenced to life in prison without parole. In April 2025, after a 10-week trial, Monica Sementilli herself was found guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances and conspiracy to commit murder. She now faces life behind bars with no possibility of parole. The tragedy of this case is not just the murder itself, but the betrayal at its core. Fabio was loyal, devoted, and loving. A man who built something beautiful for his family. And the person he trusted most in the world was secretly plotting his death. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous betrayal doesn't come from strangers, but from the person sleeping beside you. Case number 5, Kristen Rossum.
Open the door to get her a new trial.
New at 5, 10 News reporter Steve Fiorina joins us with what those attorneys hope new blood sample tests will find.
On the surface, Kristen Rossum seemed to have everything. At just 24 years old, she worked as a toxicologist for the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office, a position that demanded intelligence, precision, and professionalism. She was young, beautiful, and married to a man who adored her. Together with her husband, Greg de Villers, she lived in a comfortable apartment with what looked like a promising future. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind the professional image and the marriage, Kristen was hiding secrets. She had rekindled a methamphetamine addiction, and she was having an affair with her married supervisor, Dr. Michael Robertson. When Greg discovered both the drug use and the affair, he confronted her. He threatened to expose her addiction to her employer, which could have destroyed her career and reputation. And that confrontation sealed his fate. On November 6, 2000, Kristen dialed 911. She claimed her husband had taken his own life. When paramedics arrived, they found Greg lying lifeless on the bed. But there was something unusual about the scene. His body was surrounded by carefully scattered red rose petals. It looked staged, theatrical, not like any suicide seasoned investigators had seen before. Kristen insisted Greg had been depressed and overdosed on prescription medications, but toxicology tests told a different story. Greg's body contained lethal levels of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid many times stronger than morphine. And the combination of drugs in his system wasn't consistent with suicide. It was consistent with deliberate poisoning. The evidence mounted. Investigators discovered that vials of fentanyl were missing from Kristen's workplace lab. They found a receipt showing she had purchased a single red rose that very day, the same petals found on Greg's body. And perhaps most damning, the medical examiner's office determined Greg had a needle mark that couldn't be explained by medical treatment. Prosecutors painted the picture clearly. Kristen Rossum had murdered her husband using her knowledge of toxicology, staging the scene to mimic the famous movie American Beauty with rose petals as a grotesque cover-up. Her motive? To keep her affair hidden, avoid exposure, and free herself from a marriage she no longer wanted. At her 2002 trial, Kristen showed little remorse. Her defense argued Greg had killed himself after learning of her infidelity, but the science was undeniable. The fentanyl dose alone was enough to kill him, and only someone with access and expertise could have administered it. The jury convicted her of first-degree murder with special circumstances, murder by poison. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Today, Kristen serves that sentence at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. Every appeal has failed. A civil court later awarded $10 million to Greg's family, but no amount of money can replace what was lost. Greg was only 29 years old. He believed in his marriage. He trusted his wife. And when he tried to save her from the secrets destroying her life, she silenced him forever. A woman with beauty, brains, and opportunity, who chose deception, betrayal, and poison instead. Case number 6. Angelina Rodriguez. Some cases are chilling not just because of the crime itself, but because of the cold calculation behind them. That was the story of Angelina Rodriguez, a California woman who used marriage as a weapon, turning love and trust into opportunities for profit. It was September 9, 2000, in Montebello, California, when 41-year-old Jose Francisco Frank Rodriguez suddenly collapsed and died inside his home. At first glance, there were no obvious signs of foul play. No wounds, no forced entry, no struggle. His wife of just 4 months, Angelina, told investigators it was sudden, unexpected, maybe a heart attack. But questions arose almost immediately. Why would a healthy man in his early 40s drop dead without warning? And why was his new wife so quick to inquire about life insurance payouts just days after his funeral? Detectives dug deeper. They discovered that Angelina had convinced Frank to take out a $250,000 life insurance policy, naming her as the sole beneficiary. The timing was suspicious. The policy had been finalized only months before his death. Toxicology testing later revealed the truth. Frank hadn't died naturally. He had been poisoned. His system contained ethylene glycol, the main ingredient in antifreeze, along with evidence of oleander exposure, a deadly plant toxin. Investigators believed Angelina had been slowly poisoning her husband by contaminating his food and drinks. Prosecutors alleged she had even tried other methods before resorting to poison, including tampering with gas lines in the garage in what may have been an attempt to cause an explosion. The more they uncovered, the more sinister the pattern became. Then came the most disturbing revelation of all. Investigators looking into Angelina's past discovered that in 1993, 7 years before Frank's death, her 13-month-old daughter, Alicia, had died under suspicious circumstances. The case had been ruled an accident. A pacifier supposedly caused her to choke. But after Frank's murder, authorities began to suspect a darker truth, that Angelina had profited from a life insurance payout then too. In 2003, a jury found Angelina Rodriguez guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances, murder for financial gain, and murder by poison. She was sentenced to death in 2004, one of the rare women to be placed on California's death row. The judge at sentencing did not mince words. "In 20 years, I have never seen a colder heart," he said. But as with many capital cases, years of appeals followed. In 2024, her sentence was reduced to life without the possibility of parole due to procedural issues in her trial, though her guilt was never overturned. Today, Angelina serves her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility, the same prison that houses Kristin Rossum. For many, her case represents the ultimate betrayal, not just murder for money, but the exploitation of the most sacred bonds of family. A husband who thought he found love, a child who never got to grow up. In both cases, Angelina Rodriguez stood to benefit, and that fact alone is what makes her story one of the most haunting in California's history. Case number 7, Kelsey Turner.
And Jim, we know arrest warrants have been issued for 2 more suspects. That tells us that detectives do not believe Kelsey Turner acted alone. We're told one of those arrest warrants has been issued for Turner's boyfriend.
Some crimes sting more because they blur the line between generosity and exploitation. That was the story of Kelsey Turner, a Playboy and Maxim model whose beauty masked a life built on manipulation, betrayal, and ultimately murder. For years, Turner lived a glamorous lifestyle in California and Las Vegas. Her Instagram showed designer clothes, luxury cars, and high-end apartments. But what her followers didn't see was that much of it was being funded by one man, Dr. Thomas Kirk Burchard, a 71-year-old psychiatrist from California. Over the course of their relationship, he spent more than $300,000 supporting her. He paid her rent, bought her cars, and covered her bills. To him, she was someone he was helping. To her, he was the key to keeping up appearances. But in early 2019, Burchard discovered forged checks, missing money, and irregularities in their financial arrangement. He decided it was time to cut Kelsey off. On March 1st, he traveled to Las Vegas to confront her, a confrontation that would be his last. Days later, his body was discovered in the trunk of Turner's blue Mercedes, abandoned in the Nevada desert near Lake Mead. He had been wrapped in blankets, but the condition of his body told a horrifying story. His head was crushed from repeated blows with a baseball bat. His face was unrecognizable. The investigation quickly pointed to Turner. Police searched the Las Vegas home she shared with her boyfriend, John Logan Kennison, and roommate Diana Pena. Inside, they found bloodstains, broken furniture, and cleaning supplies, clear signs of a violent struggle and attempted cover-up. The most chilling detail came from Pena, who cooperated with investigators. She revealed that Burchard had told Kelsey he was pulling the financial plug. Turner snapped. Pena said Kennison attacked the elderly doctor with a bat while Turner stood by, refusing to call for help, refusing to let Pena intervene. Instead, Turner helped clean up the scene and assisted in moving Burchard's body to the car trunk, where it was later dumped. The motive was simple: money. Turner wasn't willing to lose her benefactor. Instead, she allowed violence to silence him forever. In 2022, Kelsey Turner entered an Alford plea, a legal mechanism where a defendant doesn't admit guilt, but acknowledges prosecutors have enough evidence to convict. She was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. Her boyfriend Kennison received a longer term, while Pena struck a deal for a lighter sentence after testifying. Turner will be eligible for parole in 2029. By then, she'll be in her late 30s, far from the glamour and photo shoots that once defined her. For Dr. Burchard's loved ones, the pain goes deeper than just his murder. They saw a man who genuinely believed he was helping someone, only to be betrayed in the most violent way imaginable. A trusted mentor, a generous soul, beaten and discarded when he no longer served his purpose. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger comes not from strangers, but from the people we choose to trust. 7 women. 7 lives of privilege that turned into cautionary tales. From socialites and models to wives and professionals, each of them once stood in places of comfort, stability, even admiration. Yet each chose decisions that led to betrayal, destruction, and life behind bars. What unites these stories isn't just the crimes themselves, it's the themes of trust and betrayal. Rebecca Grossman's reckless speeding shattered a family. Amy Preasmyer's jealousy left a child fatherless before he was even born. Leslie Van Houten's blind loyalty turned her into a killer under Manson's command. Monica Sementilli conspired against the man who loved her most. Kristen Rossum turned her toxicology training into a weapon against her own husband. Angelina Rodriguez used poison for profit, even as questions lingered about her child's death. And Kelsey Turner let greed destroy the man who had funded her life. All of them prove one haunting truth. Wealth does not erase motive, and privilege does not guarantee morality. Behind the designer clothes, the charity galas, the professional titles, and the picture-perfect lives were cracks. Cracks filled with lust, greed, manipulation, or cold calculation. For their victims, the damage can never be undone. Families destroyed, children left behind, communities scarred. And for the women themselves, the walls of California's prisons are now their reality, no matter how glamorous their pasts once seemed. But the deeper question remains: if people with every advantage, education, opportunity, money, connections, can still choose murder, what does that say about human nature? That's why these stories matter. Not to sensationalize, but to remind us that evil doesn't always look like desperation or poverty. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, behind a smile, a wedding ring, or a luxury car. This was 7 wealthy California women behind bars, true crime stories you won't believe. If these stories stayed with you, don't let them disappear into the scroll. Share this video so others hear them too. Like, subscribe, and join us for more true stories that reveal the darkest sides of human nature. Because remembering isn't entertainment. It's the least we can do for those who can no longer speak for themselves.